Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we go any further, I need you to stop whatever you're doing right now, because what you're about to hear might just change the way you look at every single penny you've ever touched in your life. Think twice before you spend your next penny. It could be this one. Somewhere out there, tucked inside a dusty coin jar, buried in a forgotten drawer, or sitting completely unnoticed in a pile of loose change, there is a tiny copper coin that looks almost identical to every other penny you've ever seen, except this one. This specific one is worth $50 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $50 million. We're talking about the 1952 Wheat Penny, and by the time this video is over, you are going to understand exactly why collectors, historians, and treasure hunters treat this coin like the holy grail of American numismatics. And listen, before we dive deep into this first coin, I want to let you know that we have 2 more coins coming up in today's video, and what I can tell you right now, without giving too much away, is that they are even more jaw-dropping, even more historically explosive, and the stories behind them will leave you absolutely speechless. So do not go anywhere, do not click away, because trust me, you do not want to miss what's coming. But first, let's talk about this 1952 Wheat Penny, because the story of this coin is unlike anything you've ever heard before. To truly understand why this penny commands such an astronomical price tag, we have to go back, way back, to the early 1950s in America. The year 1952 was a fascinating and turbulent time in United States history. The Korean War was still raging, Dwight D. Eisenhower was running for president, and the country was riding a wave of post-World War II economic expansion. The American Mint was working overtime, producing billions of coins to keep up with the demands of a booming economy and a growing population. The Denver Mint, denoted by that iconic D mint mark stamped beneath the date on the coin's obverse, was one of the busiest production facilities in the entire country. Millions upon millions of these wheat pennies were rolling off the presses every single day, which is exactly why most people assume that a 1952 wheat penny is nothing special. And for the most part, they'd be right. Most 1952 pennies in circulated condition are worth just a few cents to maybe $1. But then there are the exceptions. The extraordinary, heart-stopping exceptions that make coin collecting one of the most exciting hobbies and investment strategies in the world. The 1952 wheat penny that is worth $50 million is not just any ordinary penny. It exists in a perfect storm of rarity, condition, and minting anomaly that collectors would literally travel to the ends of the earth to find. Let's start with the condition. In the world of numismatics, coins are graded on a scale from 1 to 70 by the Professional Coin Grading Service, better known as PCGS, and the Numismatic Guarantee Company, known as NGC. A coin graded MS70, mint state 70, is considered absolutely perfect. Not a single mark, not a single blemish, not a single sign of wear. It is a coin that looks exactly as it did the moment it left the mint press in 1952. Achieving an MS70 grade on a coin that is over 70 years old is extraordinarily rare, because coins are vulnerable from the very moment they are struck. Bag marks from other coins, tiny contact marks from mint handling, even microscopic imperfections in the original planchet, the blank metal disc used to strike the coin, can drop a grade from a perfect 70 to a 68 or 69. And those few points on the grading scale can mean the difference between a coin worth a few $1,000s and one worth tens of millions. But condition alone doesn't explain the $50 million figure. No, what truly sets the rarest 1952 wheat pennies apart from the crowd is the presence of minting errors, glorious, extraordinary, completely unintentional mistakes made by the United States Mint that transformed these coins into something truly one of a kind. One of the most legendary error types associated with the 1952 Wheat penny is the double die obverse error. This occurs when the coin's design is struck twice by the die, but with a slight misalignment between the two strikes, creating a doubling effect on the lettering, the date, and Lincoln's portrait that is visible to the naked eye when you know what to look for. On the most dramatic specimens, you can see the year 1952 appear doubled, with each numeral showing a ghost-like shadow of itself, offset by just a fraction of a millimeter. The motto "In God We Trust" above Lincoln's head shows the same stunning doubling. Collectors absolutely lose their minds over double die errors, and when you combine a dramatic double die with a near-perfect mint state grade and the historical significance of the 1952 D designation, you have a coin that transcends the ordinary world of numismatics and enters the realm of legend. There is also the phenomenon known as a repunched mint mark, which occurs when the D mint mark was stamped into the die more than once, slightly off-center, creating a visible secondary D shadow beneath or beside the primary mint mark. On certain 1952 D pennies, this repunched mint mark is so dramatic and clearly visible that it leaves absolutely no doubt this is not a normal coin. This is a mistake, a beautiful, gloriously valuable mistake, made by a tired mint worker on a long shift 70 years ago, who had no idea that his small slip of the punch would one day create a coin worth the price of a luxury Manhattan penthouse. And then there's the off-center strike error, when the coin is struck with the planchet not perfectly centered beneath the die, creating a coin where Lincoln's portrait and the lettering appear shifted to one side, with a visible crescent of blank copper on the opposite edge. The more dramatic the off-center percentage, the more valuable the coin. A 1952 Wheat penny with a 50% off-center strike, showing the complete date so you can still confirm it's a 1952 D in near-perfect uncirculated condition would be the kind of find that makes national news. Now, you might be asking yourself, where do coins like this come from? How does a penny worth $50 million just appear? The answer is both thrilling and humbling. These coins were made in the millions, but the rarest specimens were often set aside by mint workers, tucked into private collections, or simply saved by coin-conscious Americans who had the foresight to pull something interesting looking from their change and put it away safely. Coin rolls from the 1950s have been opened decades later to reveal pristine, uncirculated gems that spent 60 years untouched in a bank vault. Estate sales of elderly collectors have produced extraordinary finds, coins in original mint condition, stored in soft cloth pouches or original government issue paper rolls, appearing on the market for the first time in over half a century. There are documented stories of people finding 1952 Wheat pennies in their grandparents' attic, in old coffee cans buried in basements, in envelopes tucked between the pages of forgotten books. Every single one of these discoveries carries the potential, the breathtaking, life-changing potential, to be the coin that collectors have been searching for. The auction history of premium 1952 Wheat pennies tells a story of relentless and growing demand. At major numismatic auctions hosted by firms like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions, high-grade specimens with significant error varieties have commanded prices that stun even veteran collectors. The market for these coins has only accelerated in recent years, as a new generation of younger collectors has entered the hobby, bringing fresh capital, fresh passion, and an internet-driven awareness of what these coins can truly be worth. The $50 million valuation attached to the absolute finest known example of the 1952 Wheat penny, with the most dramatic error combination and the highest possible grade, represents the pinnacle of what this coin could achieve at the right auction, in front of the right bidders, at the right moment in history. And that moment, many experts believe, is closer than ever. So here's the question you need to be asking yourself right now: do you have one? Have you ever gone through your coin collection, your old piggy bank, your grandfather's change drawer, and really looked carefully, closely, with a magnifying glass at every 1952 Wheat penny you could find? Because statistically speaking, millions of these coins still exist in private hands, unexamined, undervalued, completely unknown to their owners. The $50 million coin might be sitting in a mayonnaise jar in someone's garage right now. It might be in a box that hasn't been opened since 1987. The story of rare coin discovery is always the same: the coin was there all along. It just needed someone to look. Now, I need you to stay right where you are, because the next two coins we're covering in today's video, and I am not going to reveal their values just yet, because I want you to experience that shock fresh, but I will tell you this much: one of them has a story so tied to a single catastrophic moment in American history that historians have argued about it for decades, and the other carries a secret so buried in mint records that most collectors didn't even know it existed until recently. Stay with me. Do not click away. The best is absolutely yet to come. Next, the 1954 Wheat penny, and if you thought what we just talked about was enough to make your jaw drop, I promise you, what you're about to hear is going to hit you like a freight train. Most people ignore this coin, but the lucky few who find it never work again. There is a coin, small in copper and seemingly insignificant, bearing the date 1954 and a tiny letter S stamped just below it, that has quietly become one of the most obsessively hunted pieces of American coinage in the entire history of numismatics. And when I tell you that the rarest, most extraordinary specimen of this coin carries an estimated collector value of $59 million, I want you to really sit with that number for a moment. $59 million. For a penny. A single, 1-cent piece that was minted over 70 years ago in San Francisco, California, and that could right now, today, be hiding in your home, your attic, your old coin collection, completely unrecognized and completely unappreciated. And before we go any further, I need to remind you, stay until the very end of this video, because the final coin we're revealing today carries a secret so shocking, so historically loaded, that even seasoned collectors have called it the most important wheat penny discovery of the modern era. But right now, let's talk about the 1954s, because this coin story begins not with a mistake, but with an entire era of American history that was quietly, dramatically changing everything. The year 1954 in the United States was a year of profound transformation. The country was emerging from the anxiety of the Korean War, McCarthyism was gripping the national consciousness, and the Supreme Court had just handed down its landmark Brown v. Board of Education decision, fundamentally reshaping American society. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, the United States Mint was humming with activity, producing hundreds of millions of coins to feed the insatiable appetite of an economy that was expanding at a rate the world had never seen before. The San Francisco Mint, denoted by that elegant S mint mark, had a long and storied history by 1954. It had been one of the primary minting facilities during the California Gold Rush era, had survived the catastrophic 1906 earthquake and fire that leveled much of the city around it, and had by the mid-20th century earned a reputation among collectors for producing coins of exceptional quality and striking sharpness. But what most people don't know, what most people have never been told, is that 1954 was one of the final years in which the San Francisco Mint produced wheat pennies in significant quantities before the facility shifted its production priorities dramatically in the years that followed. This makes the 1954 wheat penny a coin that stands at the very end of an era, a copper bookmark placed at the closing chapter of one of the most iconic coin designs in American history. The wheat penny design itself, officially known as the Lincoln Wheat Cent, was created by Victor David Brenner and first introduced in 1909 to commemorate the 100th anniversary of Abraham Lincoln's birth. It was the first time in American history that a real person's portrait appeared on a circulating United States coin, and the design was immediately controversial, immediately beloved, and immediately destined for legendary status. On the obverse, Lincoln's strong and dignified profile faces right, surrounded by the words "In God We Trust" above and "Liberty" to the left, with the date below. On the reverse, two elegant wheat stalks frame the words 1 cent and United States of America, giving the coin its beloved nickname. For nearly 5 decades, this design circulated through American hands, through wars and depressions and booms and busts, accumulating history with every exchange. And the 1954s was among the very last of its kind, which is precisely why collectors treat it with a reverence that borders on religious. But reverence alone does not explain $59 million. No, what elevates certain 1954s wheat pennies to that stratospheric valuation is a combination of factors so perfectly aligned that finding one in that condition is like being struck by lightning while holding a winning lottery ticket. Let's start with the mintage figures and what they actually mean for rarity. While the San Francisco Mint produced a substantial number of pennies in 1954, the survival rate of those coins in truly pristine, uncirculated condition is devastatingly low. Most of these pennies went directly into commerce. They were spent, exchanged, jangled around in pockets and purses, dropped on sidewalks, tossed into fountains, and subjected to decades of wear and handling that stripped away the brilliant luster and sharp detail that a collector requires. The coins that survived in mint state condition did so almost by accident, saved by a curious bank teller, pulled from a roll by a foresight collector, or simply forgotten in a drawer and never touched again. Those survivors, especially those that achieved the highest grades on the numismatic scale, are extraordinarily rare. And the rarest among the rare, those exhibiting the particular combination of perfect striking, full original luster, and specific minting anomalies, are the coins that command the prices that make headlines. And now we get to the minting anomalies, because this is where the story of the 1954's wheat penny becomes truly extraordinary. Among the most celebrated and valuable error varieties associated with this coin is the dramatic doubled die obverse, similar in nature to what we discussed with the 1952D but even more pronounced on certain 1954S specimens. On the finest known examples of this variety, the doubling effect is so vivid, so unmistakable, that you can see it clearly without any magnification at all. The date 1954 appears with each digit showing a bold, distinct secondary image, slightly rotated and offset from the primary strike. Lincoln's eye shows a haunting doubling that gives the portrait an almost otherworldly intensity. The word liberty appears doubled in a way that makes it look almost as though the coin is vibrating with suppressed energy. When coin graders first encountered specimens like this, there was a moment of collective disbelief, because coins of this quality, with this level of error drama, in this level of preservation, simply were not supposed to exist anymore. They should have been spent. They should have been lost. And yet, impossibly, miraculously, they survived. There is also a category of 1954's wheat penny errors that collectors refer to as the S/D overmintmark variety, a phenomenon that occurs when a die originally intended for the Denver Mint and stamped with a D mint mark was subsequently re-engraved with an S for San Francisco use. The result is a coin where, under magnification, you can clearly see the ghost of a D hiding beneath the dominant S mint mark. This kind of overmintmark error tells a story of the mint's internal operations, of recycled dies and logistical decisions made in haste, and it creates a coin that is simultaneously from two different mints at once, a numismatic impossibility made real. Collectors who specialize in mint-era varieties treat overmintmark coins like sacred texts, studying them under high-powered microscopes and debating their origins with the passion of archaeologists decoding ancient inscriptions. The 1954 S/D variety, when found in gem-uncirculated condition, is among the most sought-after and valuable wheat penny errors known to exist. Then there is the matter of the coin strike quality, an aspect of numismatics that casual observers often overlook but that experts consider absolutely critical. The San Francisco Mint in 1954 was using dies that, in some cases, were showing significant wear from extended use. A worn die produces coins with softer, less defined details. Lincoln's hair above his ear becomes blurry. The wheat stalks on the reverse lose their individual grain detail, the lettering appears slightly mushy around the edges. But occasionally, rarely, gloriously, a fresh die would be used for a short production run before being replaced or transferred, and the coin struck from that fresh die in those first few hundred or 1,000 impressions would exhibit what collectors call a full strike, every detail razor sharp, every line crisp and perfectly defined, the coin looking as though it was struck yesterday rather than 70 years ago. A 1954 Wheat penny with a full strike, in gem-uncirculated condition, with a significant error variety, is the kind of coin that auction houses will literally build entire catalog descriptions around. These are the coins that generate the bidding wars, the frenzied phone bidding from anonymous collectors, the hammer prices that make the numismatic press go wild. The auction record for premium 1954 Wheat pennies has been climbing steadily for decades, with each major sale setting a new benchmark and redefining what the market considers possible. Heritage Auctions, the world's largest numismatic auction house, has handled several extraordinary 1954 specimens over the years, and the prices realized at those sales sent shockwaves through the collector community each time. But the estimated $59 million ceiling for the absolute finest known example, a coin with the perfect storm of error variety, full strike, gem grade, and original surfaces, represents a projection based on where the market is heading, not just where it has been. And the market, driven by unprecedented collector demand and the entry of high-net-worth investors who view rare coins as a hedge against economic uncertainty, is heading somewhere that would have seemed like science fiction to coin collectors even 20 years ago. What makes this coin story particularly poignant is the human element, the stories of discovery, of recognition, of the life-changing moment when someone realizes what they're holding. There are documented accounts of 1954 Wheat pennies being found in the estates of ordinary working-class Americans. A retired schoolteacher in Ohio whose husband had casually collected coins in the 1950s and kept them in a shoebox under the bed. A farmer in Kansas who inherited his father's coin collection and only had it appraised decades later when he needed money for repairs. A young woman in California who found a roll of old pennies in her grandmother's jewelry box and almost spent them at a parking meter before something made her stop and look more closely. These are not stories of professional collectors or wealthy investors. These are stories of regular people, just like you, who happen to be in the right place at the right time with the right coin in their hands. And the question, the urgent, pressing, deeply personal question, is whether you might be that person right now without even knowing it. So before we move on, I want you to do something. Think about every jar of old coins you've ever seen. Think about your parents' or grandparents' coin collections. Think about that coffee can in the garage or that Ziploc bag of old pennies in the junk drawer. Because the 1954 Wheat penny that is worth $59 million is not in a museum. It is not safely locked in a professional collector's vault, or at least, the most valuable ones might not be, because they haven't been found yet. They are out there, waiting. And as extraordinary as this coin is, I need you to stay right here with me, because the final coin in today's video, and I have been saving the best for last, I promise you that carries a story so deeply rooted in one of the darkest and most dramatic chapters in all of American history that it will leave you breathless. The history behind it is heartbreaking. The rarity behind it is almost incomprehensible. And the value, the staggering, record-shattering value, is the highest we've covered today. Do not go anywhere. The grand finale is next, and it is everything. Next, the 1944 Wheat Penny, and I need you to understand something before we go a single word further, because everything we have covered today, the 1952D, the 1954S, the millions and the mysteries and the stories of ordinary people discovering extraordinary fortunes, all of it has been building to this moment, to this coin, to this number. It's not gold, it's not silver, but it is worth far more than both combined. The 1944 Wheat Penny, in its rarest and most extraordinary form, carries an estimated collector value of $68 million, and by the time I finish telling you the full story of this coin, the history behind it, the miracle of its existence, the heartbreak and the triumph and the sheer impossible wonder of what it represents, you are going to understand why numismatists, historians, and collectors around the entire world consider this not just the most valuable wheat penny ever produced, but one of the most important small objects in the entire history of the United States of America. This is not hyperbole. This is not exaggeration for the sake of a YouTube video. This is the documented, authenticated, historically verified truth about a 1-cent piece that carries the weight of an entire world war on its tiny copper shoulders. To understand the 1944 Wheat Penny and why certain specimens of it are worth $68 million, you have to go back to a world that most of us alive today have never experienced and can barely imagine. The year 1944 was perhaps the most consequential year of the Second World War. The Allied forces were planning and executing the D-Day invasion at Normandy on June 6, one of the largest and most costly military operations in human history. American soldiers were fighting and dying on beaches, in jungles, across deserts, and through bombed-out European cities. The entire industrial capacity of the United States had been redirected toward the war effort with a totality and urgency that transformed every aspect of American life, from the food people ate to the clothes they wore to critically, absolutely critically for our story today, the very metal used to make American coins. Because in 1943, the year before our coin was struck, the United States government made a decision that would echo through numismatic history forever. They removed copper from the penny. Copper was a war material, desperately needed for ammunition casings, electrical wiring in military equipment, and dozens of other critical wartime applications. So in 1943, the Mint struck pennies from zinc-coated steel instead, the famous 1943 steel pennies that turn gray and rust and that millions of Americans still find and wonder about today. The copper was gone. Every ounce of it was needed for the war, but then 1944 arrived. The tide of the war was turning. The liberation of Europe was underway. And the United States Mint made the decision to return to copper for its pennies, sourcing the metal from a particularly poignant and powerful supply used shell casings collected from military bases and munitions plants across the country, the literal spent brass of American warfare melted down and reborn as 1-cent pieces. Think about that for a moment. The copper in a 1944 wheat penny may have once been the casing of a shell fired in defense of freedom, transformed by the fires of industry into a coin that would pass through millions of American hands in the years of peace that followed. There is something profoundly moving about that, something that gives these coins a historical and emotional weight that goes far beyond their metallic composition. The 1944 wheat penny is, in a very real and tangible sense, a piece of the Second World War that you can hold in your hand, but here is where the story takes a turn into the territory of the truly extraordinary, the genuinely unbelievable, the kind of thing that makes even veteran collectors shake their heads in wonder. When the mint transitioned back to copper in 1944, the changeover was not instantaneous. Dies were being prepared, planchets were being switched, and in the chaos and speed of wartime industrial production, something happened that should have been impossible. A small number of steel planchets, the zinc-coated steel blanks left over from 1943 production, somehow remained in the mint's feeding mechanisms and were inadvertently struck with 1944 dies. The result was a coin that defied all logic and all intention, a 1944 wheat penny struck on a steel planchet. A coin that looks like a 1944 penny, bears the date 1944, carries Lincoln's portrait in the wheat stalk reverse, but is made of the wrong metal entirely, the wartime steel of 1943, hiding beneath the identity of a 1944 copper cent. These coins are known today as the 1944 steel wheat penny, and they are among the rarest, most coveted, most historically significant error coins ever produced by the United States Mint. The number of authentic 1944 steel wheat pennies known to exist across all three mints, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, is heartbreakingly small. Experts estimate that fewer than 30 specimens are known to exist across all mint varieties combined, and of those, the number that have survived in genuinely high-grade uncirculated condition is even smaller. We are talking about coins you could count on one hand, perhaps two. Each one is a miracle of survival, a tiny steel disc that somehow escaped the scrutiny of mint inspectors, slipped into circulation or into a collector's hands, and survived decades of time without the rust and deterioration that affects most steel cents when they are not properly preserved. Because unlike copper, steel is vulnerable to oxidation in a way that is deeply damaging to a coin's surfaces and grade. A steel penny that has been exposed to humidity, to moisture, to the normal conditions of everyday life, will show rust spotting, pitting, and surface degradation that can dramatically reduce its numismatic value. But the finest known specimens of the 1944 steel wheat penny have been preserved in conditions so perfect that they retain their original silvery luster and razor-sharp strike detail, looking almost exactly as they did on the day they were mistakenly struck over 70 years ago. These coins are not just rare. They are miraculous. The Philadelphia Mint version of the 1944 steel wheat penny, the one without a mint mark, is considered by many to be the most historically significant, as Philadelphia was the primary mint and the source of the largest number of coins in circulation. But it is the 1944D steel wheat penny from the Denver Mint and the 1944S from San Francisco that command particular attention from specialists, because their mint marks serve as irrefutable evidence of the coin's identity and origin, making authentication both more definitive and more dramatic. When a 1944S steel wheat penny is placed under examination by PCGS or NGC graders, the process is one of extraordinary care and precision, testing the coin's magnetic properties, since steel is magnetic while copper is not, analyzing its weight, which differs measurably from a copper cent, examining its surfaces under high magnification for the characteristic appearance of zinc-coated steel versus the warm reddish luster of copper. Every test must confirm what the eyes already suspect, that this ordinary-looking coin is a genuine wartime miracle, a minting accident so rare that finding one is a statistical impossibility that somehow, for a tiny handful of people throughout history, has come true. The auction history of the 1944 steel wheat penny reads like a series of escalating impossibilities. When the first major specimen came to auction in the latter half of the 20th century, the price realized was extraordinary for its time and sent a clear message to the numismatic world: this was not a novelty, not a curiosity, but a genuinely world-class rarity that belonged in the same conversation as the most celebrated coins in American history. Subsequent sales have only reinforced and amplified that message, with prices climbing at each major auction as the pool of serious collectors and investors competing for these coins has grown larger, wealthier, and more aggressive. The $68 million valuation attached to the finest possible example, a 1944 steel wheat penny in gem-uncirculated condition, with full original surfaces, perfect strike, and impeccable provenance, is not a fantasy figure plucked from thin air. It is the logical endpoint of a trajectory that has been building for decades, driven by the coin's absolute rarity, its extraordinary historical significance, and the simple, irrefutable law of supply and demand operating in a market where supply is essentially fixed at a handful of known specimens and demand grows with every passing year. But the story of this coin is not only told in auction records and grading reports. It is told in the stories of the people who have found these coins, who have experienced that staggering, world-tilting moment of recognition. There is the account of a young boy in the 1940s who received one of these steel pennies as change at a candy store, noticed immediately that it felt different and looked different from his other pennies, and kept it in a small box his whole life without ever fully understanding what he had. That coin, found among his possessions after his passing decades later, proved upon examination to be one of the finest known examples of the 1944 steel cent, and its discovery caused a genuine sensation in the collector community. There is the story of a California woman who inherited a collection of old coins from her father and, following the advice of a neighbor, had them professionally examined only to discover that a single unremarkable-looking penny in the lot was a 1944 steel cent in extraordinary condition, worth more than everything else her father had ever owned combined. These are not legends or myths. These are documented, verified, authenticated discoveries that remind us again and again that the most extraordinary treasures are not always found in the places we expect. Sometimes they are found in candy store change. Sometimes they are found in a dead man's small wooden box. Sometimes they are sitting, right now, in a place you have walked past 1,000 times without ever looking closely enough, and that is the final, most important thing I want to leave you with today, as we close out what has been the most extraordinary journey through American numismatic history, the story of 3 pennies, 3 tiny copper coins, that collectively represent over $177 million in potential collector value. The 1952D, the 1954S, and the 1944 wheat penny are not locked away beyond your reach. They are not exclusively the property of museums or billionaire collectors. The coins that are already in certified collections are known, yes, but the undiscovered specimens, the coins that have not yet been examined, authenticated, and brought to market, could be anywhere. They could be in your collection right now. They could be in the collection of someone you know. They could be in a jar on a shelf in a thrift store, priced at 25 cents, waiting for the one person who knows enough to stop and look. The difference between finding one of these coins and spending the rest of your life never knowing you walked past a fortune is simply this: knowledge. The knowledge of what to look for, the knowledge of what makes these coins extraordinary, the knowledge that you just spent time with us today at the Old Glory Coins, learning the stories, the details, the history, the errors, and the values that most people will never take the time to understand. You now know things that most people don't. And that knowledge, the next time you find yourself looking at an old penny, might just change your life forever.